Quick introductions. Professor Kausar Azam has had a distinguished career spanning over 3 decades. She is a recipient of several national and international awards awarded by the Fulbright and Rockefeller Foundations, and has been a member of the International Committee of American Studies Association of the United States, and has had the distinction of being the plenary speaker at inauguration of the International American Studies Association in 2003 at the University of Leiden, Amsterdam. She's widely traveled, has written, edited 8 books, several articles, and has taught, lectured at American universities, including those at Illinois, Iowa, New York, North Carolina, Atlanta, Detroit, and also at Oxford, Brazil, Italy, Beirut, Tokyo, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, and several universities in South Africa. Ma'am is a former member of APPSC and is now a professor emeritus attached to the OUCIP as Advisor Programs and Development. Dr. Amirullah Khan is a development economist and adjunct professor of the NCR HRDI of the Government of Telangana. He's the research director of CTPP and is also a former civil servant from the batch of 1993. He currently teaches at Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad, the Indian School of Business, and the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Has worked on various research projects for the European Commission, National Council for Applied Economic Research, Planning Commission, Confederation of Indian Industry, and the World Bank. And Dr. Amir has also been engaged with the Project Large of the UNDP on legal reforms and with Encyclopedia Britannia in the previous century. During this millennium, he has worked with the Equitas Consulting India Development Foundation, PhD CCI Bangalore Management Authority, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Amir is editor of the Journal of Development Policy and Practice and has a degree in electronics engineering from Osmania University, rural management from IRMA, and a PhD from Jamia Millia Islamia. And I will hand over this to Anant.
Thank you, Isha. In that very long description of Amirullah Khan's career, the one thing that always surprises me is that he's a 1993 batch IAS officer sitting right in its us. All right. So I just wanted to very quickly frame this whole conversation because there are several points that kind of get connected as dots for me in this. Let me start with recollecting a conversation that we had during the height of the COVID lockdown period. We were putting together a series of conversations on Hyderabad, the Deccan, and its place in India. Right? It was basically supposed to be a group of people who had studied Hyderabad city, the Deccan area, and so on, in whatever form, whatever their subject of study may have been. And we asked them very simple set of questions. कि आपके questions को आपके field में किस तरह से बदलना है. That is, you come to the field with a set of questions, you walk into the field speaks back to you, tells you go back, rethink your question. And then you come back with a set of new questions. So how does that happen? What does the field tell you? How does it push back? That was one question. The second question obviously was that after you have done this reworking, what has it done to you as a person? Did the field actually remake you from who you are and what has it become? Right? What did you become after this? The idea was that places make people, they remake people and so on and so forth. And one of the things that happened was somebody who had studied Deccani art had made an interesting observation that Hyderabad state had invested a lot of money in digging up Ajanta and Ellora. Huge amounts of investments. And the idea was that Ajanta and Ellora is part of the Deccani history. And there was an idea that we should actually start building a certain kind of Deccani national identity. This was the imagination of the late 40s and 50s, early 50s. Now, suddenly, that whole dream of building a certain kind of a Deccani nationalism, imagining a Deccani modernity, begins to break down and something else begins to happen. And then Ajanta and Ellora becomes part of the Indian art, and Hyderabad gets left behind in the story of modernity in some way. That Hyderabad is somehow not up to the mark. So this was what the art historian story was. And when we mentioned this, somebody laughed and said that कि यार हिंदुस्तान में कोई भी standard up to the standard Hindustani नहीं हो सकता है. None of us is good enough for India. Somehow or the other, we are all inadequate. आप या तो मलाबार से आओ, आप बंगाल से आओ, जहां से भी आओ, थोड़ा सा तो प्रॉब्लम है, थोड़ा सा आपके अंदर कमी है. You will always find that India is telling you that you are not good enough for my modernity. That was the basic claim. When all of this was happening, one of the things that we were beginning to think about was that when we started Hyderabad, the Dodin, one of the first things we did in the Dodin event was to look at a place called Mallepalli in Hyderabad. We were very curious about Mallepalli because Mallepalli was interesting in many ways. Because the fact that Farhan grew up in that Mallepalli area, but Mallepalli's pin code is 501. That's the same pin code as the General Post Office. Very prestigious address. It was a housing society that was created as part of the City Improvement Board, and the houses that were built there were all taken by people who actually came from somewhere else and found their place in Hyderabad. So a lot of people from UP who had moved into Hyderabad as Kayas, as Muslims and so on, they're all settled down there. Mallepalli then slowly became the center for Urdu poetry. It became the center for sports excellence in a particular way. Amirullah College got set up there in the 50s, which was trying to actually think of itself as the place where modern Hyderabadi becoming a part of the Indian modernization project becomes possible. So if all of this was the story, we thought that it would be interesting to keep thinking about what these different locations of production of modernity could be. And we thought that one of the places that we should look at, and we haven't looked at all, is the Osmania University itself, right? Because Osmania University, being the kind of center that it was in the 30s, 40s, etc., a lot of translation work in Urdu, with a lot of new people coming in, and I keep thinking about this study on Shamirpet, a village study done by SM today. It's like the most important piece of work in the world of sociology in this country, and nobody thinks about why it is actually produced in Hyderabad, right? It's not coming from anywhere else in India. So there's something that was happening in Hyderabad, in Osmania University in the 50s, 60s, etc. And I think that it's really important for us to try and capture some of those stories as oral histories to figure out what we are, who we are, and where we are headed. So that's the broad idea, and therefore I thought that we should have this conversation at this point of time. And we are so lucky to have Amirullah Khan and Professor Kausar Azam anchoring this whole thing for us right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anant. I mean, only you could have spoken so eloquently while the pump was raging on. Thanks so much. So what happened over the last month was that a big tragedy actually triggered this thought. We lost Professor Anil just 2 weeks ago. And when we lost him, we lost a whole century of memories and contributions. And that enabled us, in a happy sense, to bring together two of his favorite people. And when they spoke on his death, a whole, an entire landscape of brilliant poetry came out and nostalgia on what it meant to be in Osmania University for the last 70 years. And there, Professor Kausar Azam, who is very hesitant usually to come out and speak, came and gave us this really wonderful journey across the years and remembered several of those people who contributed a lot to learning and literature in Hyderabad and Osmania. That is how we realized that we should do this and take this up as actually a project. And it stems from two of her writings, which she was kind enough to share with us. And she actually wrote this very masterly piece, and it's a very beautiful essay on the forgotten sons of Hyderabad and of Osmania University. where she traces contributions that professors in Usmania University make over the last 100 years. Usmania is a little more than 100 years old now. It's the 7th oldest university in the country, and possibly the largest in terms of student enrollment right now. It's consistently been in the top 20 universities in the country forever. In this new NIRF rankings, it slipped down for something, but otherwise consistently been on top. And I'm speaking to a lot of people I know here who studied proudly at Usmania, which includes me. And in that, and Anant and Farhan, and I can just count everybody here. So, and in that beautiful campus. So we got Professor Kausar Azam to talk to us so that this serves as a catalyst for us to now seriously start documenting all that Usmania University produced and gave. And the interesting thing about Usmania's contribution is that when you look at it entirely and in all the areas that we find Usmania University's contribution, you see an Usmania school of thought emerge. It's very interesting. For example, the whole Telangana movement actually owes itself to Usmania University. There's really no other institution that catalyzed it as much until today, till it was born. It was Usmania University that led that whole and led that thinking that we needed a separate state. And therefore, it was important for us to bring this. What we want to do today is to start this conversation. Have Professor Azam take us through her very close and a very intimate and a very proud association with Usmania University. She says ever since she was 4 years old or 6 years old, and so it's at least 20 years of association or a little more. But she has this really intimate association, and we'll talk to her on those lines today. Just allow her to recollect those contributions that she saw being made around her. Several of those catalyzed by her because her own contribution to the university is immense. One of the most celebrated professors that Usmania University ever had, in her contribution as a researcher, as a professor, as somebody who took the ASRC forward, who took special interest in social science research and continues to do so even today. Her personal contribution has been enormous, and in that, because of the respect that she gained across the world and among her colleagues, she has a great relationship with several of them who think very highly of her. She thinks very highly of them. So, Professor Kausar Azam, I really want you to start off by telling us about there is one point that you make in that writing. Yeah, it is, and you can use that.
Tell me what.
Yeah. So in that piece that you wrote on the Forgotten Sons, you start off with Professor Harun Khan Sherwani.
Yeah.
Somebody who a few of us have heard of. Sita, I'm sure, has heard of Harun Khan Sherwani. So, can you tell us a little bit about why you put Harun Khan Sherwani up there?
At the outset, let me thank all of you. I had no idea what this meeting was going to be. I thought we'll just sit down and talk. And that has come a bit too late anyway. So I was happy to listen to a number of younger people. Now, why did I put Professor Harun Khan Sherwani at the beginning? Because I think I owe my intellectual growth to that man, even though I used to see him from a distance. He was the man who founded the Department of Political Science at Usmania University. We, as a Department of Political Science, were born in 1948. Before 1948, political science was a part and parcel of the history department. And Professor Harun Khan Sherwani was the head of the history department. 1948, we got separated, and Professor Harun Khan Sherwani was the head of the Department of Political Science and History. So, because he founded the subject into which I walked in, I couldn't but begin my recollections with anybody else. So that was the reason why I began it. Hello? Yes.
So, a little bit about his work.
He was a voracious reader, a contributor to the history of Deccan, Islamic thought, a very, very encyclopedic range of knowledge he had. But my misfortune was, by the time I got into a position to learn and to teach, he had retired long ago. So, but even in my younger days, as a young lecturer, I used to see him in public meetings. I used to see him literally walk from wherever he was living to the mosque in Himayatnagar every Friday, and I would stand in my balcony and watch Sharmani Sahab ja rahe hain. That's all. And after that, I didn't see him. So that is, he left his impact on political science department, because when we began as the Department of Political Science, what were the concerns of this department? Because we had just become independent. 48, 47 was India's independence. 48 was the merger of Hyderabad with the Indian Union. And we were born in between the two historical events. So it was just natural for the teachers and the then students to talk about that and to ponder over the possibilities of further studies, etc. By the time the department came into the 1950s, the academic concerns were constitutions, basically. The nature of Indian state, democracy in India, secularism in India, and most of the these papers were earlier introduced, comparative politics, government and politics. We were to study 9 different countries, political theory, Islamic political thought, ancient Indian political thought, where we had Manusmriti and the rest of them, and these were often subjects. Then a major change took place. Prior to this continued, there were 4 compulsory papers in MA previous, and in the MA final, 2 compulsory papers and 2 optionals. Those optionals were Indian administration and problems of public administration. Somehow I never wanted that, and by the time I came to the final year, I was very fortunate, because the subjects of international law and international relations were introduced. International relations was taught by Professor Rashiduddin Ahmed Khan. International law was taught by his brother, Professor Bashiruddin. So we had a very exciting classrooms discussing all that, and we were very fortunate. So
before I get to asking you specifically about Professor Rashiduddin Khan, another one of those stalwarts who changed the course of political science education in the country itself.
Yeah.
I will take you away from academics a little bit and want to hear about the Osmania University. You know, those 40s, 50s and 60s. How did it look like? What was the campus like? You were a frequent visitor from
No. 50s, I do not know Osmania. I was a child. My first vision of Osmania was when I was about 5, 7 years old, and we were the primary schools in Hyderabad. So we would be taken for excursion. So our teachers put us in the van, and then they delivered us on the Osmania campus. And we were flabbergasted. We didn't know what building was that. We thought it was a king's palace. And because it was so majestic, so beautiful. And then we were taken inside those never-ending corridors of the Arts College. And the entrance itself is so beautiful and so majestic. We were just looking that, and then we didn't know how to build our heads. We were taken to the science blocks. That was my first entry in Osmania. Later on, when we grew up, there is this University College for Women at Kochi. So that was our first station, because even though Arts College was considered to be Osmania University, but the undergraduate college classes were in different colleges. Nizam College, University College for Women, which is now a declared university recently, and Secretariat Science College. Even that science college, somewhere I'm forgetting the name. So first entry was in Women's College. And Women's College was a part of Osmania. I wish some of you have seen Women's College. If you not, please go and see it. It is now projected in all its vast glory. When we entered University College for Women in Kausar, it was a building with history, with the stories of love affair, there was history there, there was romance there, there was excitement there, and then we as young students in University College for Women would roam around the entire territory of that because it was like a huge garden with the Darbar Hall and all. And then there was this Lovers Rock where Kirkpatrick and his wife used to sit and spend their evenings. I do not know whether they have still kept that rock because William Dalrymple writes about that. And we have sat on that rock, on that Lovers Rock, and imagined what the lovers must have been talking to each other. But then what happened was in the University College of Women was a wonderful institution. Dr. Sridevi was the principal of that college when I entered. All this I have given you in my writing. Dr. Sridevi was an administrator, a philosopher, and a very, very able lady. And she also taught us logic in PUC. That is my first year in the. But subsequently, Osmania University abolished the topic of logic in our syllabi, much to the harm of all of us because most of us have become illogical in our life. So logic should have given us some way out. And I remember most of my teachers about whom I have mentioned, and then do you want me to mention them now? I particularly remember Professor Anita Chetrat Kumar, Professor S.K. Kumar's wife, who was such a wonderful teacher. And then she was teaching us Antigone, Sophocles' Antigone. And she emoted the feelings of Antigone and then made us cry because here was the young woman who was trying to put cover the body of her brother with some mud and sands. And we would think, how could that happen? Did it really happen in history? So that was, and she was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Because a teacher, particularly a teacher of literature, has to make you feel what he's teaching about. A teacher of political science has to make you feel what is the denial of equality and democracy. I mean, it works every day in our lives, where you feel ignored, where you feel unrepresented. So the kind of combined education which came to us, one was Professor Anita Chetrat, and then there were two ladies, Miss Shroff. Miss Shroff was teaching English literature. I mean, my special subject was English literature, political science, and economics. And then King Lear was prescribed. And my God, how she enacted how Lear must have felt on the heath, the famous heath scene in the last acts of the thing. And then she literally said, "Pray undo this button," because that is the last sentence. He was feeling suffocated and he was dying, and that is Lear was dying. And she, you see, these are the kinds of people. Then Professor Mrs. Phillips, she taught us comparative politics. Mrs. Habib was the first Muslim woman professor of political science in the portraits of Osmania. Mrs. Habib, a very gentle, a very soft-spoken lady who taught us a very strong subject, political philosophies. And then these were the people. And from there we graduated and I opted for political science. That was, I think, in the fitness of things because I loved my teachers who were teaching me political science. Sometimes we as teachers shape the trajectory of our students. So it was Mrs. Phillips who shaped my trajectory for political science because I wanted to be like her. I very much wanted to be like her, as effective, as wonderful a teacher. She is still alive and she is receiving her pension from Osmania University, for which we worked recently. Her pension was denied. Not upgraded. She was getting a mere 40,000 rupees and the pensions have gone up. So we have worked it out. business studies, and then we came to arts college. That was a very exciting time, and we had professors teaching. Professor Rashiduddin Khan, Professor Bashiruddin Ahmed, Professor P.V. Rajagopal was the head of the department. His English was so good, and he was a wordsmith. You could feel the words sliding out of his mouth like a factory. And the complete mastery of English language. He was the one who told us that if you want to succeed in life, you have to have a command over English language, because English is the door to all progress and development. And before that, we were already students of literature, but then he actually taught us political science, but also the world politics. And then both Amir and he has talked about 60s in Usmania, and I will now concentrate on that. 60s was a very exciting time, not just for Usmania and Hyderabad, but for the whole world. For the whole world, because there were campus revolts in University of California, where a boy was shot dead, anti-Vietnam protest. There were campus revolts in France, Paris basically, and then that percolated to the other European countries. There was the Chinese aggression in the India's northeast. There was a Cuban Missile Crisis. There was an Indo-Pak War 1965. And then within the political science portals, you have the 24th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, Keshavanand Bharati case, and the implications of that. So we had a very exciting time learning and talking about political science. And those professors, there was no Google then, there was no cutting and pasting there. So our professors used to tape the news items from the BBC, big huge tape recorders, not like this. So, and then make us listen to the discussions about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Wow. And Professor Bashiruddin said that, look, this is what the concept of intervention and the concept of blockading in international law is a very important concept. And that is how Bashir Sahab made us visualize what was happening around the island of Cuba and where the missiles were kept and all that. That was Professor Bashiruddin. And Professor Rashiduddin said all the time that international politics is a game of chess. Not anymore. International politics has become a horrendous game of killing each other, meaningless killing each other. But then I'm talking about 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And Professor Rashid was not just a political scientist. He had a sense of history because he was a child of history department. And what he brought to the classrooms was not just history but also Mirza Ghalib in teaching of international relations. What he taught us in the teaching of international relations was not just Ghalib and Schumann and Morgenthau. Morgenthau was the master of international politics, and he said, look here, Morgenthau cannot be right. Point out the mistakes of Morgenthau. He would give us those kinds of things. And I had a very personal relationship with him. He was my intellectual father. He was my PhD supervisor. I did my PhD under his supervision. And then he would tell me to do this and that. First I did something, and I worked on the tribal separatism in India. And I did a small monograph. And I said, sir, this is a part of national integration. Why don't you accept it? He said, get lost, write about all the problems. So, meanwhile, there was a turmoil in the eastern part of the subcontinent. The birth pangs of Bangladesh, because where the government of India supported the Mukti Bahini. So we were talking about Mukti Bahini. Mrs. Gandhi picked up Professor Rashiduddin Khan, and it was Ramesh and Robila Thapar in Delhi, I think, who had recommended Rashid Sahab for membership of the Rajya Sabha. And Mrs. Gandhi, those were the days when prime ministers would still hear and listen to professors, not anymore. So that to do with my thesis. Because as a young person, I was very belligerent and full of confidence. उससे क्या करना है आपको? तो बोले कि कभी तुमने चावल बनाया है? मैं बोला नहीं बनाया, तो इसीलिए तुम मेरे से लड़ रही हो. चावल का एक दाना अगर मैं चुन लूं तो मुझे पता चलता है कि चावल पका है कि नहीं. So I said, is it that bad? Anyway, he trained me in the intricacies of pursuing my research, basically library and issue analysis. I got my PhD with him. That was Professor Rashidul Khan. Then we were appointed as lecturers in Secunderabad Evening College. Most of our students were older than us, and I think I was the youngest among them. The students would take pity on me, and then one senior man, he was a very nice man, he said, you talk too fast. It's not good for your health. Oh my God, a student coming and telling me that. Fine. So Evening College was 1965. Then we had a war with Pakistan. So not just the border areas, but Usmania skies were also blackened because Hyderabad was a defense city. We had DRDL, we had Mishra Dhatu Nigam, we had all those different installations, and the government of India was concerned that Pakistan would bomb Hyderabad. So we were teaching still in Secunderabad Evening College 6 to 9. So coming back home in the RTC buses, in the thorough darkness on the roads, and walking into my house was a Herculean task, but we survived. And after that, the story, I was transferred, and then a few years after that I joined ASRC. I got a number of competitive fellowships, and towards the, it's a long history, you will not be interested. By the time I retired as the director of the Southern Regional Center, plus political science professor. In between, I had done a 5-year stint at the American Studies Research Center. And as a senior professor, I was very fortunate to get the cooperation of Professor Silaman Siddiqui, who was the Vice Chancellor, and the other Professor, of course, T.S. Reddy, Professor T.S. Reddy, and this is.
I just want to take you there. You know, among the vice chancellors, you saw quite a few of them, and you remember a couple of them very, very fondly and very. So, you know, can you tell us about why D.S. Reddy is such a legend? And,
of course, he was. Yeah. We are what we are because of D.S. Reddy. Let me tell you that, because when the political dispensation changed from Hyderabad as a princely state to Hyderabad as one of the states in the Indian Federation, the need of the time was the world should know not the political Hyderabad but the intellectual Hyderabad. And that is where Dr. D.S. Reddy's contribution was immense. He did some kind of a scouting around the Indian universities and brought in the best of minds from outside Hyderabad. Professor Shiv K. Kumar, the doyen of English literature, came here in 1959. Then Professor Gautam Mathur, who for the economics department, whose books have been recommended in the courses in Oxford and Cambridge, his textbooks. Professor Mazur Alam, who was a builder in every sense of the word, he established the Center for Indian Ocean Studies, which is now unhappily closed because these are the changed timings. Professor M.A. Mutalib, who worked on Whitley concepts of Britain, and who else was there? Yeah, these are some of the professors whom I remember. That Professor E.G. Parmeshwaran, yes, he was the youngest professor. He was a very young man, and you think that he is perhaps a MA final student. But what a man! And he established, he was the dean of social science. Muslims are the zalims, and the rest of the Muslims are shasdar. We are hayran. हम इतने हैरान हैं कि ये क्या हो रहा है? कि what is it? One Muslim killing the other, one Muslim raping the other, one Muslim killing the babies and all. So that was an eye opener, and Professor Rashiduddin Khan was an acknowledged. He did not believe in the mullahs. He did not believe in the rigidity of religions, and he always told us, stay away from the mullahs. And then I think I have literally followed that that advice of his. Okay, that was Rashid Sahab, a wonderful man. A very handsome man, a wonderful man, a poet, a philosopher, a teacher, and a very stern and a caring man. He would ask, what have you eaten this morning? And then he would ask, what is the capital of Poland? So that is how. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. I am so grateful, so fortunate to be his student, to be his research student, and to be his colleagues in the later years. That was Rashisa.
You also mentioned Bhadri Raju Krishnamurthy, who was so
He was a very eminent man. Professor Krishnamurthy established the Department of Linguistics in Usmania University. What Zohar Sahab did for the Urdu Rasaniyat, that is the linguistics, Professor Krishnamurthy did for Usmania, and he was an internationally recognized person. He was the Vice Chancellor. He got his Padma Shri, and I think very eminent man. About him I have written in my subject. Maybe you can read it out for them. And now I don't recollect what all I have written.
And that is something that we are going to circulate. Before I come across to you for your questions, my last question to Professor Kausar Azam is that Professor Azam, there must have been something about all of you and your teaching that resulted in Hyderabad being today an oasis of political, cultural stability, syncretism. While the rest of the country is burning, you rightly put it that we've forgotten how to respect academics. The political structure is. What is it that makes Hyderabad unique?
First, let's talk about your geography. It's a meeting point of North and South. And then the best of North and the best of South is here. Hello? Otherwise, it's a meeting point because it evolved as a monarchy from late 18th century. And when a historic moment came, there were turmoils, but then it slided into the new modernity. And it slided with certain hiccups, not political hiccups, but personal hiccups of those people who took the brunt of this merger. Not everybody. And the brunt of the merger was not. Umar Khalidi has done The Fall of Hyderabad. I commend that book to you all. But in the writing of history, which is happening now, perhaps a little of it was happening then also. So we really don't know how to corroborate the narratives of destruction and murders. But the one thing why Hyderabad is the kind of Hyderabad, the Nizam of Hyderabad displayed enormous sagacity. It was the sagacity of K.M. Munshi and Sardar Patel and Nehru who converted the Nizam into a Raj Pramukh. Just imagine some princely state getting into, if you ask a question, you are debarred from parliament, as it happened yesterday. But now, that was a time when a princely ruler was given an honor to be somebody in the new dispensation of the government of India. And that is what Hyderabad has been. This merger of ideologies led to a very fertile ground for creativity in all its manifestations. And then I think I brought a book where certain parts of it are reflected. It became a center of North and South. Literary cultures were developed. There are a number of languages which were neglected during the Nizam's days, and the Telugu writers have very openly written about it, how Telugu was neglected. And given in the dispensation of an autocratic ruler, I am not surprised that Urdu was put up and Telugu was subdued, but that happens in the lives of history, that happens in the lives of the communities. What is great is for the communities and the literatives of the community to rise up and regain their space, reclaim their space in the social setup. So that's what has happened to Hyderabad.
Thank you so much. So I'll take some questions from 1 and 2. Oh.
I'm also an old student of Osmania University, though I have different memories.
Name.
My name is Geeta Ramaswamy. Of course, Geeta, I know it. Yes, so I have a question. Given what is claimed to be the eclectic nature of Osmania University, why have the departments of certainly political science been silent over what happened in 47-48? I mean, you talk of international relations, you talk of wars everywhere else, but what happened in Hyderabad? Why is it that nothing has been, no study, no inquiry to what happened in Hyderabad in 1948 has been taken up by Osmania University and political science department in particular? What my department? Hello. What my department did do or did not do during 47 and 48, I cannot answer for that. Later what happened, it all went into another project, the history of the Deccan, and the project of oral history, which was initiated by Professor Harun Khan Sherwani and Rashiduddin Saab. We went into the survivors of the police action, those who witnessed police action from both sides, the misdeeds of the Razakars and the sufferings of the ordinary people, and those I think have been recorded by Umar Khalidi. It was not taken up by the department because the department's concerns were to bring the political science department on par of the other departments of political science in the Indian universities. That's how I feel. I do not know, because 47, 48 was a long time back. I became a member, a student 62 to 64, a faculty 65 onwards. By that time, police action was long behind us. So none of us were thinking, but then what we were thinking, which I never liked, was election studies called psephologies. And I never believed in elections because, like today, even in those days, not many elections were genuine elections. You should recollect, they were booth capturing, they were the use of money and other things. With all that, we muddled through democracy. We just muddled through. Not that we were a perfect democracy. No democracy is perfect. Not even Donald Trump's democracy is perfect. So we muddled through it, and we are where we are now. We started election studies, we started rural studies, state government and politics, because back to Telangana agitation. From Telangana agitation onwards, we have recorded history. The first document which there was a Young Lecturers Association which was established in 1965, of which I was a member but not an actor. And that was started by Venkatesh Kulkarni and Rajesharam Sharma, Venkatesh Kulkarni, Anant Rautota. These were the people. And they started Young Lecturers Association, where they would talk about constitutional amendments, current politics, literature, politics, culture, music, everything got into young lecturers, including the treatment of guide by the filmmakers. What was the difference between the written word and the film? Because not many were happy, including R.K. Narayan himself. And then also Dr. Zhivago, how it was. Because these were discussions on films and politics, as well as 1969 agitation. The then Vice Chancellor, Professor Ravada Satyanarayana, took an active part. Meetings were held in his residence, and they brought out the first major document justifying the claim for the separate Telangana state. Way back in 1969, a number of youngsters were killed, there was police firing, and it was a very big movement, so much so that it became a part of the international news. The Time magazine gave the cover to that particular thing, and it took so many years for the students of Usmania to take up the issue once again, way back in 12, 13 and 14 when we became the Telangana state. So the concerns had shifted from historical tragedies looking towards development and the new trajectories which were open to us.
Hi, my name is Farhan. My father and my uncle both were working at the Osmania University. So I have these childhood memories of there being background conversations happening at home. Every evening, Azam would come back from the university and join Abba for a cup of tea. And one of the things that I distinctly remember, one of my earliest childhood memories is that they spoke about this very odd thing that in the day they would teach these kids and in the evening they would go and listen to them make full political speeches. So, for example, they would say that in the evening once they finished their work, they would go and listen to George Reddy speaking, who was actually a student. So there was a role reversal which happened almost on a daily basis with them. Yeah, so I think, I just wanted to know what it was because you would have gotten this firsthand.
I was not in that group, but talking about George Reddy, I remember George Reddy was a voracious reader. He would all the time read and read and read in the cellars of the present Usmania University Library. I used to sit and a friend of mine also used to sit and start doing research, and we saw George Reddy that afternoon, the day he was killed. And he had just got up and walked out, and by evening my friend told me, look, the boy who sits with us every day is now murdered. Later on we remembered it was George Reddy, and later on I met Cyril also in ICSSR, and that's how. Now, the roles were reversed because perhaps, and rightly so, as academics, they were performing their academic duty, but they could not kill their conscience. That is the reason why they were speaking about George Reddy, why they were speaking about the injustice meted out to the dissidents of Usmania and the system, why they were worried about where we were going as citizens of a democracy. These senior professors were extremely alive to their social and political environment. Yes.
Professor, there was a period during that time when Usmania really fell into disrepute.
Oh yes.
And how did that happen and how did it come out of that?
I will not name the vice chancellors. It will not be in good taste. But then Usmania had gone down terribly in the 70s. So much so, those agencies which were advertising for jobs went on saying, Usmania candidates need not apply. It was a matter of shame. And then came Jagan Mohan Reddy, oh my God, what a man, who was Justice Jagan Mohan Reddy after emergency. And then he set right many things. If Dr. D.S. Reddy put Usmania on the world map of knowledge and learning, Mr. Jagan Mohan Reddy cleansed Usmania of all the filth and the dirt which had gotten into that, because it had gone down. And then there was this corrupt and inefficient professors were supposed to be dismissed, which he did. But later on, this group of professors went to the court, and the vice chancellor, that was G. Ram Reddy, had to garland them and take them back into the faculty. Yes. And one of them died of heart attack. Yes. And then there was a family welfare fund, and the family of this person who passed away was my colleague. They said they refused any fund. They said we don't want any money from Usmania University. They said they killed our head of the family welfare. His name was Mr. Abdullah, Economics Department.
Yeah. So this will be the last question.
Thank you. My name is Ramaswamy. Fascinating and just the tip of the ocean, So the New India Foundation gives a grant for non-fiction writing project, anything about post 47 India. So perhaps a proposal could be made for a biography of Osmania University or about Osmania, or what we were talking about this morning, all that plethora of subject. It's basically intellectual history. I came across a fascinating article by a historian. It was about partition 47, but we all know about Jinnah and his demand for Pakistan, but there was a vision of Purbo Pakistan. There was a Bengali Muslim vision of Purbo Pakistan, which had nothing to do with Jinnah Sahib. So, and then there's another dimension. Purbo Pakistan was visualized as a Muslim socialist peasant utopia. So I didn't know all this. So there's an article called Purbo Pakistan Zindabad, and there's a subtitle by Nilesh Bose. He's a historian, he teaches in the UK. And then he's written a whole book tracing the intellectual underpinnings of political movements. So that your talk brought that to mind as well. We need to write the intellectual history within politics in Hyderabad.
Thank you so much for giving me last comments. A number of aspects have not been able to cover, and talking about history and the historical development, Purbo Pakistan is now. I covered the demand for Pakistan in my thesis, and Jinnah wanted Hyderabad also. Later on he realized that he did not want a moth-eaten Pakistan. A Hyderabad was sitting in the lap of a Hindu India. He could not stomach that. Then that is how there were three kinds of things. One was Usmanistan, the other was Bangay Islam, which you are talking about, and the other was Muslim majority areas in the western Pakistan. So in other words, which I wrote, and I had to defend very strongly with Rashid Saab, that Pakistan was essentially a religio-regional demand. A religio-regional demand. Muslim majority areas which were contiguous geographically to each other. And East Pakistan divided by the rest of India could not have survived. Geographical contiguity is a must. That's what happened to Biafra in Nigeria. Because Biafra could never become an independent state because it was part of eastern Nigeria. So geography helped the Muslims of former East Pakistan to assert themselves under the leadership of Mujib, and then became. There are several scholarly studies about which I may not be aware. Some of those I read during my days, but then I shifted to other areas like international relations, different studies and all that. So Mr. Rashid used to say, and I also believe, the day you submit your PhD thesis, your intellectual growth begins. Till you have not submitted your PhD thesis, you are a prisoner of your topic. But the moment you submit, not even award, the day you submit, you feel so liberated. Now I can read Dennis Robbins. Now I can read detective novels. Now I can do anything under the sun because the thesis is gone. So that is how I ventured into many areas, and I thoroughly enjoyed walking into the fields which were not mine. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Professor Azam. This was. I think this is an interval and picture. Lots of it left. So we will do that, and thanks for the suggestion, Ramaswamy, on the New India Foundation. And
Yes.
That's that Ram Guha and that group, right? So
Published One India.
One India. This foundation is a different one. This is
Bangalore, there are London and Ram Guha.
So we'll look into that. But thanks so much, Professor Azam, for taking us through this delightful
And ending with another nostalgic piece, which was Dennis Robin. And who's heard of Dennis
Dennis Robin in so many days. Yeah, I haven't heard of Dennis Robin in 30 years. So thanks for bringing, thanks for bringing all of that back. What we are certainly going to do is reach out to all those names that Professor Azam talked about who are still around, and ensure that this history of Hyderabad, Usmania University, this whole Usmania view of India as an idea, we capture and recreate.
Somebody asked, I think you mentioned, is there a history of Usmania recorded? 3 years ago, in 2017, we celebrated 100 years of Usmania. And there is a Usmania website, centenary website. On that centenary website, a number of articles tracing the growth, the genesis, the growth and the development of the university into different areas are there. You'll find them on the Usmania website, most of these. And this piece which I wrote was one there.
Yeah, Anant.
Okay. Thank you so much for this. It's been such a wonderful session. Do you want me to say this? There's someone here very closely related to Professor D.S. Reddy. Sita Reddy. Daughter, the granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
Yes.
Your mom was in the library.
The reason why I'm actually mentioned it is that actually that one of the things that I've always thought about Usmania University and in general 60s is that the 60s was a period when there was a very serious attempt to think about institutions very carefully. And that effort to think about institutions carefully meant actually that even though there was pressure from the student community and the faculty against the Vice Chancellor who is not from Telangana, the students actually rejected a governmental move to politicize the appointment of the Vice Chancellor. They said that we may not want this Vice Chancellor, but we are not giving you the right to appoint whoever you want in this place. Right? And that's the key thing. That was the most important moment for me in understanding that spirit of the 60s, which is really about trying to think through institutions that are not dependent on what we want at that moment of time for our particular interests. Right? So that's...
Professor D.S. Reddy had raised a war with the then government, and Professor Rajagopal, Vashwati and all of us who were younger teachers, we got a robust support we gave it to Dr. D.S. Reddy, and he won the issue of autonomy. The university
autonomy of the university was the thing that's what they fought for, right? So the reason why I'm mentioning this is that for me, one of the things that I'm taking away from this session is that there's something interesting about Hyderabad, which is probably not true for many other cities, or maybe it is, I don't know. I think the markers, the points of departures and entries, decade on decade, are very distinct in Hyderabad. So, for example, when Professor Kausar Azam was saying that, look, I don't know what really happened in the 50s, I know the 60s, right? I can think of a number of people who can tell you that, look, I know the 70s very well. I don't know what the 60s was all about, right? And I think that it is this character of the city in which you have these very distinct shelves of memory is something that we'll have to work with, we'll have to build on that, to try and see what we can make of that to understand India, because those moments of rupture actually connect very closely to broader indicators of economic shifts across the country, right? When the growth takes off, when the rural-urban growth equality indexes actually shift, when the migrations from the rural areas into the city, every one of them is connected to the intellectual history of the city.
When you talk about migration from rural to urban, Usmania became a hub to welcome the rural students. And then, so much so that there were departments and there were colleges which are doing only teaching in the Telugu medium. And one of my colleagues, who was a champion of Telugu medium, went abroad and came back and championed for English medium. One of my colleagues, younger colleagues and my former students. Talking about Dr. D.S. Reddy, there is a very personal thing which I want to share with you. maybe I can share with everybody. 1964, I finished my MA, and then I became a tutor in English because there were no vacancies in the department. So I went and taught English grammar, composition. Every day I used to bring about 90 notebooks, correcting them. Then there was an advertisement for lecturership. So I went. And Kausar Azam was not like this those days. I was young, shy, hesitant Muslim girl stepping out of a Muslim household, wanting to attend the lecturer's interview. Do you remember? Can you imagine how I went? I went in flats. In a Sarkar Kutta, holding my books like this, answering all the questions which Dr. D.S. Reddy did. He said, when did you qualify? I said, sir, last year. He said, you come back next year. He said, no, you come back next year, I'll take you. And he did.
Thank you so much.